What is up, world? My name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking. In this series, we are learning Git and source control. If you do not know how to merge or rebase or branch or push or pull or stash or stage, if you don't know how to cherry pick or open a PR, watch the earlier videos in this series. We covered so much, and we're doing it in a very strategic order. So in the last video, we learned how to open a PR, how to create a pull request so that somebody else can review our changes. But now we're going to take that to the next level. The first thing we're going to do is actually add branch protection or rules to our branches. So as I was saying in the last video, most of the time if you're working in your own project, you'll branch and then you'll merge and you don't need a PR. But if you're on a team, chances are they're going to want you to branch and then open up a PR, a request to merge it back in. So if we're actually going to open up pull requests, then we also want to make sure that nobody is just merging without a PR. So the first thing we're going to do is add branch protection rules so that there are specific rules such as you can only merge this code if it's through a PR. It's the first thing we're going to do. We're then going to talk about if we're getting our PR reviewed, who needs to review it. And there's something called code owners that we're going to set up. So think of these as like the senior engineers on your team or the owners, the final sign-off. Who on your team does that need to be? So not only are we going to open up a PR, but we're going to require that a code owner actually approves the PR. So it's not just the other junior engineers that say, yep, looks good to go. It's the code owners that have to come in and actually approve it. And the third thing we're going to talk about here is PR templates, pull request templates. So when you open up that PR, you have the ability to add a description. And you can write a couple notes so that the reviewer knows what this pull request is about. They know why you've made these changes. But if you're working on a larger team, oftentimes teams are going to have a template, specific things that you need to write or call out when you open this PR. So at a high level, this is really going to save the reviewer's time because instead of having to guess what your code is doing, you're going to follow this template, you're going to fill out this form and explain ahead of time all of the changes in your code so the reviewer has a better understanding of what is in this PR.
All right, welcome back everybody. We are in the playlist here. We are learning Git and source control. And it's been a lot of fun so far. We learned about cloning, committing, staging, stashing, pushing, pulling, merging, rebasing. We covered cherry picking, PRs, pull requests, how to merge and how to squash and merge after a pull request. So we're now experts on creating pull requests. However, in this video, we're going to dive deeper into actually creating the pull request. And we're going to talk about some of the ecosystem around creating a good pull request. So we're going to talk a little bit about protecting branches, creating code owners in GitHub, as well as pull request templates. Let's start in here by just opening up our project and let's take a look at what we've built here. So far in our app, we have a main branch. For most of this course, we've only used a main branch. Now we've learned how to do branching and how to do merging, but every time we branched, we merged back into the main branch. In an upcoming video, I'm going to talk about Git flow and how we would actually handle merging in a production environment. But for right now, for a simple project, we only have this main branch. And the main branch is the most important branch. It is a sacred branch in our app, in our timeline, right? It is the sacred timeline. And we do not want to corrupt our main branch. Imagine if somebody did something wrong and they force pushed something and it broke all of our commit history. If the main branch gets corrupted, it basically will corrupt everything else in our repo. So most of the time when we're doing work, we're going to do it on a different branch. And we basically never want to merge into the main branch until something is finalized. Until we have built a feature, we've released the feature, and once it's released, we'll merge it into the main branch. In an upcoming video, I'm going to talk about Git flow, and we're going to talk about how to do those releases and when to actually merge. But the concept I'm talking about right now is just, we don't want people merging or changing our main branch unless it is approved by the senior engineers on our team. So we don't want people to just merge into main on a whim. And we did that earlier in this course. All of these merges before we had PRs, we were just merging into main. Create a branch and then I merge into main. I can do it without creating a PR. In reality, most of the time we want to avoid that. we don't want people just merging into main by themselves. So we instead want to set up branch rules so that certain branches, such as our main branch, are protected. And in order to protect it, we're going to give it rules like nobody can merge into main unless that PR has been approved by a senior engineer or something like that. So what we're going to do is jump into our repo on GitHub here, and we're going to go into the settings tab. We're going to go to the branches tab here, and then we can add a branch protection rule. It literally tells us define a protection rule to disable forced pushing, prevent branches from being deleted, and require status checks. A couple of videos back, we talked about rebasing, and we also dropped commits. And when we did that in Gitkraken, we had to force push those changes up to GitHub. And that force push, as I was explaining, changes the actual commit history. And so sometimes that is what we want. But when we're relating it to the main branch, we basically never want somebody to change the history of our main branch. This is the sacred timeline. This is the timeline that we don't want to ever get corrupted. So if I go to another branch, a feature branch or a development branch, and then I'm merging and rebasing, I might allow all of those force pushes to happen. But on the main branch, I want to restrict it so that nobody can change this history ever. So what we're going to do is add a protection rule to this branch. The branch name pattern, so that's the name of the branch, is the main branch. And now we can check here which rules we want to add to this branch. First one is require a pull request before merging. So previously, we had been able to just merge into main without creating a PR. Now, some of these we created PRs, but most of these earlier in the course, we didn't have any sort of PR. So we could just merge into main on the fly. And you could imagine that if you don't have a rule set up, a junior engineer might just merge their code into the main branch without any sort of approval. So here we're going to say, yes, you can only merge into main if it has first been approved through a PR. The second checkbox is, not only do we need to create a PR, but does that PR need to be approved by another engineer? So when I created a PR in the last video, I merged it myself. I didn't actually approve somebody else's PR. If you are reviewing somebody else's PR, there's that button to either request changes or to approve it. So this is saying, not only do we need to create a PR, but now we need to make sure it gets approved. Now it's asking us how many people need to approve that PR. So sometimes in a larger production environment, there might be 20 engineers, and you might say 2 engineers both need to approve this before it can get merged. So in a smaller app where it's just maybe you, maybe a couple engineers, 1 is probably enough. But bigger companies probably want a second or third opinion. So 1 engineer looking at it and approving it is good, but 2 engineers is a little better. Now this is a little bit of a gray area because the more engineers that you require to review it, the more time it's going to take before that approval gets done and reviewed and approved by 6 people. So the more you have here, obviously the safer it's going to be because more eyes are on it, but the slower it's going to be to actually get that merged. So most of the time I'm keeping this around 1 or 2, depending on the size of my team. The next one we're going to talk about is require a review from code owners. So here we're saying how many other engineers on the project need to approve this. And here we're saying, do any of those engineers need to be code owners? So we have the ability in GitHub to mark certain specific GitHub usernames as the code owners for our project. So a code owner, think about it as like a senior engineer. So you might say here, you need 2 engineers to approve it. And then if we check this, it's going to require at least one of those 2 engineers to be a code owner. We're going to set up code owners in just a couple of minutes. The next big one is require status checks before merging. So status checks could be various different things. You can create GitHub actions. For example, if I created a PR, I could create an action that says, run all of these tests to ensure that this PR is compiling and passing our unit tests. And then this is saying, require all of those checks, so all of those tests, to actually pass before we can merge it. So I don't have any checks right now, but I will check it anyway because it's probably a good habit for when I do start adding checks. We can also require branches to be up to date before merging. So this is something that I like to have on as well. You could imagine a situation where you were behind the main branch. So maybe you were a couple commits behind and you wanted to merge it in, and some commits happened on the main branch that were not on your side branch. This is basically saying require the branch that's going to be merged to first update with all the latest code from the main branch before we merge it in. I think it's a good habit to have on. The next one is require conversation resolution before merging. When you created a PR in the last video, I added comments and then we had to resolve those comments. This is saying, do we want to make sure that all of those conversations are resolved before merging? And I like this one because if an engineer is asking a question on a PR, I want to make sure that that question is actually being responded to. If I don't have this checked, the engineer who made the PR could ignore all those comments and just merge it anyway once it gets approved and not finish resolving all of those conversations. But we really shouldn't be having those conversations if we're not going to talk about it. So to keep those conversations moving and to make sure that we're only making those conversations when we actually care about something to talk about, I'm going to check this box. Required signed commits, meaning having verified signatures. I'm pretty sure all of our commits are signed commits because when you click on one, you can see that it has an author on it. And then the last thing I'll see here is lock branch. I'm not going to do lock branch, but if I wanted to lock it down so that nobody could ever change it, I can add that rule here. Allow force pushes. This is what we want to avoid, so we're not going to add that, and allow deletions. Let's go ahead and click create. So we've created our new rule. So I've created my branch protection rule on the main branch. And you'll remember that in here, I said we have to require a review from code owners. So the next thing we're going to do is set up these code owners. And there's kind of a funky way to actually do this. So I'm going to walk you guys through the steps. We're going to go back to our repo. And then at the parent level of the repo, I'm going to add a new file here. And this file is actually going to be a folder. Let's create a folder called .github, and then we'll do a /. So it creates a folder, and then we're going to name our new file code owners. And if you ever forget how to do this, you can just go on, you can Google it, you can Stack Overflow it, you can ChatGPT it. This is just a very specific way that we have to create this file. It has to be named code owners in this folder. And then inside this file, we want to tell this repo who the code owners are. So I went ahead and went on ChatGPT and I said, create a code owners file for the username Swiffle Thinking. And it gave me this document here. So I'm just going to copy this code and paste it in. You guys don't need to write all of this right now. When you're working with Markdown, these hashtags or these pound signs are comments. So in the same thing in Swift, when you do two slashes, it's the same thing as doing a pound sign. So these are all comments. And here the first comment says, to make Swiffle Thinking the default owner for everything, so the code owner for everything in the repo, just add @Swiffle Thinking. And I don't know if this is case sensitive, so I'm just going to make this capital T here. Alternatively, instead of doing it for everything in the repo, I could specify ownership for a specific directory, so a specific folder of files inside the repo. So here's the docs folder. You could imagine if you had a really big app and you had one team that was in charge of onboarding, the onboarding team, and you wanted to make sure that the onboarding engineers were in charge of the onboarding PRs. You could also specify it by specific file type. So all JavaScript files, all Python files, or all .swift files get reviewed by this person. Generally though, we're just going to keep it simple with default owner for everything in the repo. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of this. And all you really need to add to your folder is this. So if you don't have this all printed out, you can just add this. It's a star and then an @Swiffle Thinking. I'm going to leave these comments in here just in case. And if you had more than one person on your team, I think you just add, multiple names like this. So this is going to be all of the code owners in our project who generally are going to be like think of code owners as the senior engineers. So anybody can create a PR, and then we need approvals for the PR. And at least one of the code owners, one of the senior engineers needs to be one of the people that approves it. I'm going to add this and I'm going to commit these changes, and let's just commit them directly to the main branch for now. Let's go ahead and commit that. If I go back to our repo, we should be able to see it. Create code owners. We have a GitHub folder here. And to just confirm that it works, if I click into some of these files and I click in on any of these files now, I should see this little shield come up here. So this shield is going to tell you who the code owners are for that file. So if you had specific files, you can now see the specific owners who are the code owner. So now when I go and make a PR into main, it's going to make sure that at least one of those approving reviews is from a code owner. The last thing we're going to do in this video is create a pull request template. So previously when I created these pull requests, so we have a couple closed pull requests from earlier videos in this course, I haven't written any sort of description for a lot of these. So if you're building by yourself, it's really easy to create a pull request. You know what this code is doing. You know what this text means. You don't really need to add a crazy description. But you could imagine a larger company where there's 20, 30 engineers, and the senior engineers, the code owners who are going to be reviewing your code, actually have no idea what feature you're even working on. Maybe they weren't involved in the conversation. They don't know what you're building. But this is the time where you're going to create a PR and you need to describe to them what it is happening in this PR. And so if you don't have a PR template, devs can basically just write anything they want in this description. I think that's fine for smaller projects. But in larger projects, you don't want the senior engineers to have to try to figure out what's happening in this PR. Instead, the company's probably going to set up some sort of template so that all of the engineers have to put in certain types of data when creating these PRs. So we're going to go ahead and create a template now. It's going to go back to our repo again. And in that same folder that we just had, that .github folder, I'm going to create another file. Let's add a file in here. And I'm going to call this one, very specific name again. We have to call this pull_request_template.md. Pull request template.md is the name of this file. And then in here, we're going to put in the actual template. So I've again gone to ChatGPT. I said, hey, ChatGPT, can you give me a pull request template in Markdown? Markdown is the language that we use in these files on GitHub. And it gave me this template. Now this is a basic template. I'm going to copy it and move it into my code here. Every team is going to have a different template, and some teams are going to require much more info than others. So this one has, give me a title, explain what that title is, give it a description, a brief description. What type of change is this? So the engineer is going to come in here and put an X on if this is a bug fix or a new feature. So just like when we made all of our commits, we were trying to categorize our commits. Now we can categorize the PRs. So code owner will review this PR template and say, oh, okay, this must be a new feature because the new feature is checked. Has this been tested is a common one. Generally, this is basically just, does this work and compile? And most companies, most teams, I would say, basically will not merge a PR unless it has at least been tested by you. It's a little bit redundant. I would basically tell my teammates, never make a PR if you haven't tested your code. Not necessarily writing tests, but testing that it works. Even though it's redundant, a lot of companies add this in here just to confirm one extra time that the engineers have actually went through and tested that it works. A lot of companies like to have a little checklist. I've followed the rules. I've followed the syntax. This doesn't break anything. I've updated documentation, things like that. A big help for senior engineers is adding screenshots into the PRs. So a lot of times, maybe you're changing something on the UI and you can screenshot the old version and screenshot the new version. So even without running a SwiftUI preview, I can see what the output should be. And that's going to help me a lot to know exactly what I'm looking for when I go and look at your code. And then there's an additional notes section. Again, you guys can customize this. This is not the template you need to have. ChatGPT is really good at making these templates. So if you have specific requirements, I would recommend using ChatGPT. But I'm just going to keep this generic one for now, just because I think it's good enough. Let's delete this up here. I'm going to commit these changes, and let's again commit directly to the main branch, bypass the rules for now. And now let's come back into our project in Xcode. I'm going to go to Xcode, and I'm going to switch to the main branch. We're on it already. We're one commit behind the remote repo. So let's go ahead and integrate and pull down the changes from GitHub. Pull them down. I have this code owners commit. I also now have my pull request template commit. Let's go ahead and branch off of the main branch. I'm going to create a branch ns/, let's pretend like we had a Jira ticket. So we're going to call this maybe ABC-123. And then this feature is going to be maybe add new explore feature. And click create. So now I have this other branch and I'm going to do some commits. Let's go to our settings view. Let's change settings view text here. Maybe this is true. Let's commit it. So I'm going to call this a feature, update settings view. Obviously, this has nothing to do with the name of the branch that we are on. Commit it, commit. Unknown error occurred. I do not know why that's happening. I'm going to restart Xcode real quick. All right, I restarted Xcode, and it looks like if I look at this branch, update settings view did commit. So I don't know why Xcode told me an error occurred, but the commit did happen. Just one more reason why I prefer Gitkraken to Xcode. But so now we have this commit, and we want to merge this into the main branch. I'm on my feature branch. Let's now push that up to GitHub real quick. Let's go to GitHub now. We can see this branch pull through here. Let's create a pull request. And when I go to create a pull request now, you're going to see that the description automatically filled in. Now, if you create the PR through Gitkraken or Xcode, I don't think that this template will work because I believe it is a GitHub specific thing. But most of the time we're opening PRs on GitHub anyway. So now I have this template for all the developers on my team to follow. And generally speaking, I think this will change over time. This is something where maybe put in a template for your team and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, how can we kind of make it more seamless? Should we make it smaller? Should we make it larger? Should we make it shorter? What questions do we need to ask? This is something that I think your team will build and develop and mold over time. So let's fill one out. Pull request title. The title I'm just going to say is updating the settings view title. And then description, we don't have a very long description. ABC123, updating the title to this and doing something else. And then maybe I give a little bit of a background here, something along the lines of like, I implemented this function in view model to do this. And I also added this so that it fixes something else. Just a quick little description of what's actually happening in your code. What type of change is this? We're going to add a new feature here. So put a little X in there. Has this been tested? I'll just put yes for now, of course. I'm not going to create a PR if it doesn't work. And then the checklist. I have read the contributing document, so we probably shouldn't have that in our PR template. But let's just say that we did it. My code follows the code style. Yes. I've added tests. Yes, even though I have not. So if your app doesn't have tests, obviously don't put this in the checklist. There's no breaking changes. I've updated the documentation. I've commented my code, made changes to documentation. If I had a screenshot, I could just click and drag a screenshot into here, and then I can create this pull request. So now when another engineer comes here and has to review this, they're first going to be able to see, okay, here's what it's about. Here's some background on it. This ticket, maybe I would actually make this a hyperlink. So in Markdown, you can actually make a hyperlink by wrapping this in square brackets and then we're adding parentheses afterward. So let's go https://www.swiftful-thinking.com. So now it's actually a hyperlink. So I can link directly to that ticket. And then it's a new feature. It's been tested. All the checklists have passed. Now it's much easier for me to review this PR, and we have this streamlined template for all of the engineers to follow. When I come down here now, you're going to notice this whole check section is now here, and we didn't have this on our earlier PRs in the last video. Because we set up those branch rules, it is now required that at least one person reviews this before we can merge it. So we're blocked on merging right now because nobody's reviewed it. So if I was in another account, I would have to go in and somebody would have to go in and actually review changes and then approve this before we can go ahead and merge it. You can't approve your own PR, which is why I'm not going to do it right now. And so what we're actually going to do is just override, bypass those branch protections and merge it anyway. Let's go ahead and confirm merge. The only reason I can bypass is because this is my repo and I'm a code owner. The junior engineers on my team wouldn't be able to bypass this at all because of those protections. So let's go ahead and merge this, confirm merge. And now let's delete the branch. Cool. I'm going to come back into Gitkraken quick. Let's switch back to main. Let's pull the updates, see if we get that commit in. It's here. Awesome. I'm going to delete the other branch because we no longer need it. And that's it for this video. In this video, we learned how to create rules to protect branches. We learned how to add a code owners file as well as create PR templates. We are almost done this playlist, but a couple more important videos coming up here, maybe 3 or 4 more videos, and then we're going to wrap up. The most important video in this entire series is the last video, so I hope you guys are sticking around for that one. Thank you all for watching. As always, my name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.